Hey there, welcome to the Game Artist Podcast. My name is Ryan Kingsline. I am the founder of Vertex School, where we train creatives for the career of their lives. In this podcast, we interview amazing creatives to see what makes them tick and see how they got where they are today. So sit back, relax. I look forward to sharing their journey with you. Let's just jump into it, shall we?
Let's do it.
What the heck happened today?
Oh, what do you mean? What happened
The
today?
news, that epic.
With Megascans?
My God.
Yeah.
You're an environment artist, right? That's the direction you're in? Or
Mm-hmm.
you do a lot of
Yes.
things now, and I want to unpack that. But guys, welcome Brandon Pham to what we do here. Brandon, these are students that are here, and then of course we're recording this for the podcast later. But what do you think of that news? I mean, why don't we just start with that piece of news and see where
Mm-hmm.
it goes?
I think it's great. I think it opens up a lot of avenues for artists. We're going to start seeing a lot of hobbyists and personal work and professional work, bringing it up a notch. Them making it available for everyone for free is fantastic. We're actually, so I run a company
Mm-hmm.
called Godemix. We're actually partners with Quixel.
Mm-hmm.
And so we know a lot of people from that team. We interact with them a lot, and we're so happy for them. It's a very dedicated small team, despite of how big their Megascan library is. It's a very small team, and it just makes total sense that they made this. I actually was kind of joking with them on why this wasn't done sooner. It seemed pretty obvious that Epic and Quixel had like this relationship going on, and everyone was kind of waiting on either Unreal or Unity buying them, and so it's great that the bombshell kind of dropped.
Yeah, amazing, right? And it's amazing what that opens up, because literally right now I can go in and download almost any asset that I've been able to see. I can get it into Unreal now in seconds, and that's now today, and they just announced it
Hmm.
like 8 hours ago.
Yep. Yeah,
So
it's fantastic. Yeah.
the question that I got here, though, the thing that I want to understand is, of course, it's kind of like, what does that mean? Yeah, it's fun, it's great, it's all that, but I mean, I used to work at Pixelogic. I helped bring ZBrush into the world, and ZBrush killed a lot of jobs, a lot.
Hmm.
So what does this mean for environment artists? And I'm not trying to throw like, a bunch of red herrings and flags out there. I just mean like, you know, there's going to be some change. And if somebody wants to be a very compelling artist, I think it's going to be less likely that they get by with prop work than maybe they were 4 years ago. Do you agree with that?
In the last few weeks, symmetry, uh, pretty
Wait,
much.
sorry. Hold on one sec, Brendan. You came in and out. Was that me,
Also,
guys, or
is it me?
there you go?
I
You're
came in a
better.
bit late. Okay.
All right.
So prop work has been kind of phasing out in the environment field for the last few years or even
Yeah.
more, uh, due to outsourcing mostly. But when it comes to junior level positions to get into environment,
Yeah.
a lot more has been required. You can't get by with just turning in a mailbox as much as in like the earlier days
Yeah.
when I first got in the industry over 10 years ago.
Right.
Uh, you need to be able to show at least a mini environment, showing
Hmm.
some kind of composition. So that still is prevalent, right? Even with photogrammetry. A little history, at least with photogrammetry, on a personal level, is 2016 when I worked on. We were moving off of Advanced Warfare Call of Duty, and we were working on World War II.
Hmm.
That was the first introduction I've had with it, where the team was starting to do research. And naturally, the thing that you're speaking of is like the texture artists. So what are they going to do all day?
Yeah.
We're just taking images.
Yeah.
And then, of course, 3D assets, right?
Uh-huh.
At least when it comes to realistic games, uh, these are these are great news. I think anybody that goes into a technical job such as our industry has to be prepared for automation at every phase.
Hmm.
And I think I talked to my friends and even teased animators at a certain point where they kind of went through the same cycle
Yeah.
when mocap became very popular. I
Yeah.
was like, oh, I guess you guys are out of jobs. But that's, I mean, simply not true, right? I mean, if
Right.
anything, we need more animators more than ever. Although the technology's gotten better, they still need to be able to clean up and express and be in those creative rooms to come up with ideas. And the execution, if anything, has been easier. But at the same time, the technical know-how of how to bring it to a polished final version is required of any great artist. And
Yeah.
I still put value, and I think most people still put value into creativity more than the tools and techniques.
Totally.
Um, and so with photogrammetry finally arriving, I think at least in a public access where hobbyists now can really play with it, where
Yeah.
professionals have been playing with it for years now, is great. And we're going to have a lot better looking work. But you put a professional, having the access of Megascans and a beginner, there's going to be a clear difference, as always, with anything.
Yeah.
Um, the jobs, if anything, will shift towards creativity and require less and less just knowing the programs, because in the end, we value the expression, right? We don't value the how good you are at making tileable textures. It's not as important
Right.
um, as anything else. So
Well, I don't know how long you were at Turtle Rock, but do you know Kelly, Steve's wife?
yes,
So
I think
she
so.
was, the first time I met her, it was down in the village here in Laguna, and the first conversation we had was mocap, like, 'cause
Yeah.
she's like, I'm an animator, and I'm like, didn't mocap kill that? You know,
Yeah.
I was kind
Do
of,
you need money?
I was kind of like, just poking her to see how she kind of takes that. And so we
Yeah.
had this great long conversation about that and how, everybody was scared, but really, just like you're saying, it comes back to the art.
Exactly. I think within games especially, we there's so much requirement to actually sorry if my baby's crying in the
Hmm.
background.
Hmm.
Tell me if it's too loud.
It's all good.
Um, yeah, it always comes back to creativity. I think it's a great thing because, especially with AAA development and even indie development, right? There's so much attention needed from an artist to
Hmm.
put out what consumers expect now, which is high quality all the time.
Right.
And so tools like this, if it will enable us and still hit the bar that we need with smaller teams.
Yeah.
And so the struggle, if anything, everyone should rejoice and be happy about this because now, yes, the bar is set higher. Nobody should be putting out ugly sculpted rocks anymore, at least, right? We don't want to see that anymore. So this is great news. It just raises the bar on all levels. So as an environment artist and for students or professionals alike who are trying to switch or get into environment art, it enables us to kind of focus on other things. And
Hmm.
eh, I think in all industries, not just ours, we're reaching automation in every aspect. So you either can sit and whine about it, which I feel like people who are never on the cutting edge of game development will maybe complain about it,
Hmm.
but they're already left in the dust long ago if they already think like that. Like I'm already looking into Blender. I mean, Blender has been kind of like was a joke a few years ago,
It was
but
just literally 3 years ago.
yeah, and I was making fun of Blender, but now
Me
I'm the
too.
one. Yeah,
I'm an
I'm the
idiot.
one. Yeah, and I'm crawling back to these well, we kind of me and my friends kind of call them vegans because they love talking about it when nobody was really paying attention to it, but now we're going back to these guys asking for tips of how to use this program because now they're masters and ahead of the curve, and it's just crazy every 2-3 years it's something like that with
Hmm.
tools and programs. It's just you never know. And a lot of it's just because softwares that were dominant just get lazy, and innovation happens in other corners of the industry. So
Hmm.
you just can't, at least in the game industry, we move so fast with everything. And I'm sure, I mean, you bring in the ZBrush wave, you've seen it, and people are laughing how, and even now, like there's photogrammetry with environment, but 3D scans have always been popular with characters. Uh, I mean, I'm sure when you talk to your character friends, they're not really worried about their job. They're still active and fine. It killed a
Yeah.
lot of jobs, but I would say it's a lot of useless jobs, to be honest. Like no one wants to spend time. I tease about it, but sculpting rocks, you talk to a 3D artist about their time sitting there sculpting rocks. It's like, yeah, there's like the Zen moment of it, but uh, people say that just to like not feel so bad about those wasted time. It's like
It
people who,
takes
it takes a lot of time to
a
make it
lot
look
more
good.
than people think, because
Yeah.
I have students and they're like, I want to ZBrush this, and I'm like, go to Megascans. No,
Yeah,
no, I want to ZBrush this, and I'm like,
yeah.
okay, ZBrush this. Come back to me in 24 hours and tell me
Yeah.
how that works out because it is labor intensive.
Labor intensive, yeah. It's the
Yeah.
same thing with UVing. Like people who love UVing, it's like something's wrong with you, you know? It's like you shouldn't love just laying out UVs. There's so much other things you can do during development to
Hmm.
make the final art. But people kind of resolve to the abuse a bit to kind of make it feel easier. That's how I relate to it. So sculpting rocks and all these Megascan assets, essentially, now that I'm pretty sure that's going to be a term. It's not like
Hmm.
sculpting rocks in mountain ranges anymore. It's like, oh, I'll just Megascan that. It's going to be a verb, which is great because I'm done with that. I'm done with that part of my life. If someone can take a photo and I can use it and express my game in a better way, then yeah, man, all for it.
Talk to me about your career because this is your LinkedIn, right?
Mm-hmm. That's me.
This is varied, man. I mean, I love this. It's like I thought I did a bunch of stuff. So we're looking at this. You start, and of course, you're starting in 2007, so there's a lot of stuff going on there. You're going through 3D artist, environment artist, cinematic. So you're changing some of things up there. Now you co-found a school. I don't know what Blue Champs is, and now you're doing Godemics, right?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
correct.
And so, you've been through, because right about 2017, like for me, game environments has changed so dramatically. So you've weathered some of those changes, seen all of that stuff happen, started your own business. Looks like three businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so what's the goal for you? What are you aiming to achieve here?
Independence, to be honest.
Hmm.
And I'm sure you've been through the industry enough to know about this. It's just having control is the most important thing, especially the game industry is being so volatile.
Hmm.
Uh, Having the ability to call the shots and or at least see to the end of your success and failure became more important to me in the last few
Hmm.
years.
Hmm.
And you can see like the shift. I kind of started my career with AAA. So for a good part of 7 to 10 years, AAA was the only aspect of game development I knew about.
Right.
I started with Bioshock 2, went to XCOM, switched to Lost Planet 3, went back to the Bay Area to work on Call of Duties, a couple of them. And then at that point of my life, I was like, oh, the feeling of releasing big games that everyone heard of just really wore off. In a way, I kind of was burnt out from it.
Sure.
And
There was probably a lot of crunch back then too, right?
there was a lot of crunch, but I started my family early, so I was conscious enough to make decisions like I'm gonna go home. So I wasn't stuck in that like 60, 80 hour week. I later part of my career, which was probably after the 5 year mark, where I started to be more confident to kind of talk back to well, not talk back, but like speak to my supervisor and say, hey, I got my work done. I'm just gonna go home. A
Yeah.
lot of that, junior artists or mid level are more scared because, understandably so, it can be very um, career risky to kind of
Hmm.
do that type of stuff. But I had no choice, man. I have a kid and family. that I
Yeah.
would love to spend time with, and uh, it just makes it easier when you justify it like that. And so at that point in my career, when I was up in Sledgehammer, you know, I don't know if you know about this, talking to your friends and people in the industry, is the last few years AAA has gotten a lot more like strangling with your time away from work. Like it's impossible now to work on personal artwork outside of work, at least at the bigger studios. Some, maybe there's a few that encourages that, but it's becoming, at least to in my circles, like they write it within the contract and say, hey, anything you do outside of work is owned by us. It used to be just like, hey, any project that is somewhat competitive, first person shooter, like if we're making first person shooter, you can't do a first person shooter at home. It's like, yeah, okay, I get that. And then it slowly spread out as like, well, if it's on the same console, you can't work on that. It's like, well, all right, it's getting a little murky here. And then suddenly it's like, hey, you can't even do like a render. If I want to put some Megascan rocks together, I can't put it out there. I was like, what is going on? And a lot
Hmm.
of it's credit to just how big our industry's gone. A lot of people striking out on their own and finding success within that. And so a lot of good guys within a studio that becomes integral to like a franchise,
Right.
start looking for that has other options, right? Which is something that should be celebrated, right? Like finally, game artists can do more than what they're assigned to do at work, right?
Hmm.
So around that time, I was feeling that type of pressure. And so I started exploring. I started exploring professionally. I was like, all right, I wonder what a smaller studio looks like, because it seems like you can have more control, a little bit more credibility in terms of like just input, right? And then seeing that being realized. In a bigger studio, it's great to kind of be part of like this huge launch party, crazy marketing, and then everybody knows about it, right? But in the end, it's like if you step back, I felt like, well, I if I didn't exist, this thing probably still would be out there. And at a certain point, it was kind of like, then what am I making games for?
Hmm.
If something I'm putting out there um, belongs to everybody else, but not to myself in a way, right?
Hmm.
So there was a little soul searching there where I started going to smaller studios and I started liking that. But then the flip side of that is, of course, there's the stability isn't there, because you're still in like a product driven industry, right? You put something out there, it sells, therefore you can work on other projects after that.
Hmm.
So with Star Studio, even though you get the input and independence and freedom to work, and everybody, like Cheers, knows your name type of thing. I mean, that's the allure. But the negative side is like, oh man, every dollar counts here. You can't. There's Donut Fridays can start out as Donut Fridays and then can disappear the next week if we're not doing well. It's like, oh my god. So that was an experience. And then so I started going and exploring the mobile side, which is a whole different world. Working at Pocket Gyms and Turtle Rock. Turtle Rock was kind of like the middle ground of like not AAA, but like not independent, right?
Hmm.
So I really was just looking for studios around and seeing like what's the difference as my own research. Um, and so I was doing that. And then when I landed at the mobile studio last year, well, earlier this year, to be honest, the it was actually pretty great. It's a lot easier and it paid well. But then, um, at that point, I was already working on all these side businesses, and it was more for me to kind of stabilize to start going off on my own.
Hmm.
So the podcast was kind of like my answer. If you look at the podcast, Game Dev Unchained, I started that with my friend 4 years ago, right after. I quit Sledgehammer. So that kind of, and the podcast, if anything, is kind of just talking about the lifestyle and um, of game development, and just generally what game development really is about,
Hmm.
which 4 years ago was a little taboo, but now it's kind of becoming more popular about the ugliness of that industry.
Hmm.
Uh, since then, we've kind of adapted and improved to make sure we provide solutions and not just have a bitch fest about the game industry, because that's not productive for anyone. But but a lot of that came from this this confusion, this it's not anger, but this well, the pressure, but also frustration about
Hmm.
game development. And at the same time, I was exploring things professionally, what the indie development crowd looks like, what smaller studio operated like, and what mobile studios, which was, and these felt, although they're all about game development, they're like foreign countries in terms of how the studio setup is, how everybody is within those game environment. Like you would have people that didn't go to any of those industries, and it was great to kind of see how they think and how positive or negative, just to get all that data for myself to see where I want to head to next. Um, it was just last 4 or 5 years was a lot of that, and that was why the podcast came out of that. Godemics is something that I'm running with my partner right now. We provide consulting and education and code development for Unreal Engine to this blossoming industry. And I know if the students and anybody that is listening about this, but the enterprise industry, we're talking about every industry outside of games practically,
Hmm.
is utilizing a lot of game tools right now. And so now you have the combination of game technology that we all love using. We kind of started this off with Megascans, and then um, the stability of these other industries that the game industry is still kind of getting the grips on, right?
Yeah.
And although it's not as fun, and that's the one thing that you do hear from developers working at Tesla or Google or Facebook, right? These are the other industries I'm talking about.
Hmm.
But uh, it's hard to argue, at least, how much time they have to themselves now. Because as a game developer ages, right, naturally we start having family or other focuses in our life.
Hmm.
Uh, the game industry hasn't, at least in my own personal opinion, evolved enough to kind of be ready for us, for that 4-year-old plus with the family, uh, stability or a promise of stability, right? And not completely dependent on the next 3 years being a waste or not on a game, on a single release.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of figuring out in the game industry that I think that we're still struggling with,
Yeah.
that other industries such as this enterprise space is offering. And that's a lot what we've been focusing on the last few years.
So, okay, I want to circle around um, with the students and environment art and some of that stuff here in a second. But tell me a little bit more about the enterprise in terms of, like we've got a group of artists that are here, um, and so I can imagine. I mean, now what any game artist can offer to a studio now with Megascans being completely free is this is just going to go even deeper. But if they're looking at this themselves, who are they looking to get hired by? So I'm an environment artist. I hear you. I say, okay, okay, this is. I understand what you're saying about enterprise, and you know what? I don't care about it being sexy. I need to support my family. Um, who am I going to? Am I going to architecture firms? Am I going to you to go demics? How am I connecting with that market? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that market right now is really quite new.
Hmm.
So this is the main problem with that market. That side of that fence have no connections to game developers,
Hmm.
and game developers on our side have no idea that that space even exists.
Right.
And so there's this like huge disconnect between the two. And so even if we go to our usual suspect for applying for these type of jobs, they're
Hmm.
not posting there because they don't know anything about our station
Right.
or anywhere that we usually look for jobs, right? They
Right.
don't
Right.
know our industry at all. And so it's a little tough for a student to kind of reach out. A lot of it has to do with hanging out at these networking conventions. So they're trying to find us, right? They're going to hang out at GDC. They're going to hang out at an Unreal event or a Unity event because that just because the engine essentially that they're using to kind of produce these products are either of those two engines.
Hmm.
They're definitely not making their own engine, right? They have no idea, right?
Yeah.
So they're going to use any of those two, and they're going to use those events to kind of recruit people. So when you go to these events, try to not just go straight to the usual big AAA booths and apply for jobs. A lot of them are kind of smaller, these smaller tables and not as fancy logos, right? They're
Hmm.
there. They're definitely there. And a lot of their work is straightly applicable to the highest end graphics. So mega scans, anything that you can want that you want to put your effort in to the highest quality. These people can do it. These companies are looking for it because their enterprise space isn't exactly looking for like stylistic type of output. Maybe some, uh, if they are, well, most of them are looking for realism. Some of them, if they're working at like an animation type of studio, a lot of these animation studios are utilizing Unreal for real time shows, right? So imagine that. And if you look at like the Disney Junior shows or any of those kid shows that are on TV right now, and look
Hmm.
at the 3D and render, they're definitely achievable, right? Or even it can be surpassed by game engines now. That's how great things are now.
Yeah.
And the workflow is something that they're trying to wrap their heads around because game development workflow is a lot more collaborative,
Hmm.
actually works better. And so there some savvy studios, and a lot of it is just like ex game developers inside these studios kind of helping with the transition.
Right.
um, you can work on these type of shows. All these shows that you see on TV or I guess streaming platform now or Disney Plus, right? Disney Plus is today.
Hmm.
Um, will be shifting towards this game engine workflow,
Yeah.
and that's where the big jobs are. And a lot of students should really try that or look at that as a possibility, as an avenue, not as students, as just as professionals as well, professionals who are looking to make a change in career, but using the same tools and techniques and be kind of like dominant in the new space. It's an
Yeah.
exciting space to be in.
Yeah. I agree. I people, because I came from a digital sculpting background, so people kind of ask me sometimes how I got into the games idea. And I've trained for film. I've trained in concept. I've done a lot over the last decade or so, different areas. But games is always the most sustainable.
Hmm.
In film, the entire company's basically laid off after production, right?
Yeah, it's all in
Um,
Canada now, right?
yeah, and so I saw games as the most stable, but also everybody was shifting to game tech. So film previs was going to game tech, and now there's actually entire scenes in film. Someone was telling me about Star Wars and
Hmm.
how there's entire scenes that are just done in Unreal,
Oh yeah.
and now this is enterprise, and I totally get what you're saying about so actual like cartoons, kids cartoons, not being done in say Maya per se, but put them in Unreal.
Yeah.
Everything's shifting. It's a lot more stable. Is it still games? you know? And
Hmm.
basically I'm asking, should I keep calling the company Game Art Institute or should I just start calling it something else?
Well, Real Time Institute might be a catchy name
Yeah,
because we're
I thought of it.
dealing with, yeah, we're dealing with real time now. I mean, essentially, it's real time graphics, right? That's what we're slowly changing into.
Hmm.
And yeah, these shows, you're talking about like virtual production. That's another aspect that students should get into as well,
Yeah.
especially as an environment artist, right? Um, you're talking about these Disney shows, right? A lot of what directors are doing now is that they want to visualize the scene with the 3D art instead of looking at the green screen and the actor and waiting till with, post uh, post processing, right? Waiting for the 3D graphics to be added later.
Hmm.
Directors now can hold a camera up and within Unreal be able to move the camera and the digital camera within the engine and see the environment with the actors in it. And that's what's being utilized right now in a lot of these films. And it's a way better workflow, right?
Right.
And a lot of all those scenes are made by development, 3D artists, environment artists,
Hmm.
um, to help the director realize his vision on set. And as game tech gets better, they're not going to have to revisit that scene and touch it up and render it anymore, right? It's going to be a while, right, to get pre-render is hard, right? To the 5% or like 0.1% of artists out there,
Hmm.
we can tell the difference. Of course, there's a difference to pre-render in real time, but to the regular consumer, they can't tell, right? They're not trained enough to be able to tell it apart. But all industries are moving towards this approach because why not? Why would you wait when you can just render it now? A lot with like Megascans. Why wait when you can just download the rock? Uh, why wait 24 hours to sculpt something that might not look as probably won't look as good as my real rock? Like what's realer than a picture, right?
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
so
I tell my
yeah,
students, if you're going to sculpt that rock, the problem is the level of complexity is so much greater than you think.
yep.
And you get so much for free when you sample from reality. Um, but I want to circle back on this and also this whole notion of enterprise. And you do game dev, and you've been in this and in the fight for quite some time. But where do you find your inspiration? And around that question, I kind of want to peg this one thought that a lot of times when we're learning, we find our inspiration just from the fact that we finally are able to do something, right? It's like,
Hmm.
okay, God, I finally understand ZBrush. Okay, finally understand that. But the market doesn't reward that at the same level anymore, right? Like you can learn, I tell my students this, even though I help build ZBrush, I love ZBrush, I love the team behind it. I tell them, you just knowing ZBrush doesn't get you a job anymore. You
Hmm.
know, it used to, 10 years ago, but it doesn't anymore. Now you got to know it and you got to be damn good, you
Hmm.
know, and pick up some anatomy. Um, but where do you find your inspiration now? What inspires you and keeps you kind of moving?
Hmm. A lot of it's just from myself. I think anybody who's an artist, you got to look within yourself to want to put something out there that people can relate to, right? I think that's the truest form of expression.
Hmm.
You go to art station right now. I think a lot of the mistakes that people are doing is that like, oh, this looks popular. I'm gonna do a piece like this, or today's The Mandalorian Disney Plus. I swear I'm not being sponsored by Disney Plus. I said it like 10 times. But like you're gonna start seeing a lot of Star Wars artwork on your feed, and because people are trying to cash in on this little craze, right? The little
There you are.
trend,
Yeah.
and I think that's just the wrong way to do it.
What am I
At
supposed to
the
do?
end, yeah, exactly. So a lot of them, a lot of what I like to do, it comes from my personal experience. Like it comes from story. Like what are you trying to say? Do you have something to say? Do you have something to relate to the world right now through
Hmm.
your art form, either through 2D, 3D, music, whatever? If you don't have anything to say, don't say it. That means you just need to experience more things. You need to go out, travel, meet more people. Anything that you can collect that at a certain point you feel like you're busting out of your skin just to put it on paper, right?
Hmm.
That's when I feel like is something that you want to put something out meaningful that people can be attracted to, right? A lot as a student and anyone looking to do personal work, if you're looking to just improve your technique and tools, yeah, that's great. Right? You put a schedule to that every week, dedicate some time to it, and every month make sure you have a piece out and repeat that process until you feel very strongly about the tools that you're using, right? Either the game engine or your 3D program or 2D software or whatever. But after a certain point, you can keep doing that forever because you and I know every month, especially with the new ZBrushes, there's like a new tool that you have to sit down and kind of study. It's like,
Oh,
what else is in there? Unravel that, and it's like, what else can I use?
it used to take
Uh,
me a month after every release. I had to spend a month just learning it, because once I was no longer in development. I didn't know exactly what Ofer was thinking, so it took me a month every single episode.
mhm.
I'm kind of grateful I don't do it anymore because it's a lot.
It's draining, and
Yeah,
especially as an environment artist, all these students. I'm kind of biased, but I feel like an environment artist has to learn so many programs just to do one thing,
I'd agree.
right? And it's every month it's something like that. If it's not substance, and even with Quixel and Maze scans, like there's a level of preparation to make it look right
Yep.
within the engine. You can't just it's not drag and drop. It's as close as ever, right? But there's an element to it to put together a composition to make it look good.
And the
And
lighting and the
yeah, and the
rendering,
lighting. Oh yeah, there's a
settings.
whole aspect to it. So a lot of my time when I dedicate time to doing personal artwork is analyzing the tools, the new updates, and then wanting to do something with the tools to
Hmm.
express it,
Hmm.
right? So uh, the problem that I had before was like, oh, hey, all these programs, I'm like, gotta learn all this stuff and say I got it, and then I walk away for like a month. Like when I was learning Substance Designer, I walk away from them. I was like, I forgot exactly what to do. It's like it's not every day I wake up looking at nodes and patterning it and making it applicable to my daily
Yeah,
life. It's like if you're not
totally.
using it every day, you're gonna forget like all these nuances with every programs, right?
Hmm.
So it's gonna be endless like that. There's tools being released every month. I feel every major release of the software that you didn't know is like a whole new update. And so to keep up with that, to put out artwork out there that is worth a damn, that isn't just a waste out there, which I feel like just a lot of output right now that just looks like it's just a lot of garbage to kind of sift through, right?
Yeah.
And if you want to stand apart from that, a lot of it's just coming I feel from a personal story. Like, what are you trying to say, and how are you expressing that that's different from everyone else, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and the tools and techniques, if anything, should come second to support that vision. And at least the artwork that I've seen that I get attracted to, or even the games or other mediums that express themselves, uh, I find that they're successful because of that,
Right.
right? So I think anybody who's looking to improve or do something, don't just go after the tools and techniques because that's going to be an endless loop. You're never going to catch up. You were saying like a month of catch up, but
Yep.
as soon as you were done with that, I'm sure there was another ZBrush release or whatever. It's like, oh my god,
Yeah.
I got to start over.
Yeah. Ofer
Uh,
was a little maddening there.
yeah, and that happens all the time.
Yeah. Question for you. What did your parents think when you told them you were going to be a game artist?
I grew up uh, pretty relaxed. Like
Mm.
I was able to, I didn't have any restrictions. I can watch, I can play, I can stay out without too many laws. Like I was thankful for that because I was able to explore whatever. And so when I told my mom, I found out that I wanted to do um, game development in junior year.
Hmm.
I was modding Counter Strike when I was in 8th grade, just on my own, and then I was I was taking like these elective classes for 3D art during my freshman and sophomore year. But I didn't know it was a career path into junior year when I saw that there were schools for it, which was the Art Institute of Orange County. I'm sure you heard of it, right? It used to be there.
Used to be, yeah.
Um, like a lot of art institutes, it's not there anymore.
Hmm.
It's like, and so yeah, so I went to that school, and my mom was fine with it. She was just glad that I had something that I wanted to go after. And she never understood it, right? She just knew that I played games a lot, but it wasn't something that if I didn't know it was school. I mean, she's way older. She's so far from that type of entertainment where
Hmm.
she kind of just trusted that I knew what I was doing,
Yeah.
even that young. And so, yeah, that's pretty much how I got started with that. I thankfully knew what I wanted to do early enough in high school, where I didn't waste my senior year on like other things like math and science. I wish I knew earlier. I would have had, I mean, these things are they always come back, right? If I ever want to put out a game, all those uh, other educational programs would have been helpful. It all comes back to your creative output, right? But
Yeah.
if I had known that I was going to go to art school entering high school, I would have taken a lot more art classes for sure. But I think I would have had more of a relaxed time because I
Mm.
was I was studying and working as if I was going to a regular college. But then, when I went to art school, it was like, we don't care about your grades. It's like, oh, that's nice to know.
Yeah. Um, with with the podcast, you're at over 200 episodes, right?
Yes.
And there's a couple of different branches, if I remember right. As I was looking
Hmm.
at, there's game dev Unchained, but then there's a couple of other elements that you've started to pull off. Is there like, because I do these podcasts a lot so I can learn. So I'm just a junkie. Is there something that you've really picked up from any one particular podcast episode or person? Anything that
Yeah.
stands out to you?
A lot of it was how differently each compartment of game development thinks. Let me give you an example. Like, so coming from AAA, I kind of mentioned this before, and as I was exploring these different facets of game development, like the mobile industry, the indie industry, the smaller team industry,
Hmm.
I was very surprised how different uh, these sectors were from each other. Where it's like little pockets that they don't even talk to each other. There was no bridge between indie development and AAA development or mobile development. Like, and if I took a step back, we can all kind of understand that we don't really talk to each other outside of our circles. Even working in an office, you only talk to people within arm's reach, right? So uh, the guy across the studio is somebody that I'll never talk to for 4 years. I mean, that's just normal
Hmm.
within an office setting. So I was surprised to kind of find out that because these different departments of game development don't really go to the same events, right?
Yeah.
Or even hang out at the same parties, that they their outlook on the game industry was a lot different. So their attitudes when they bring it to the workplace is a lot different.
Hmm.
Um, so to go into more detail, like AAA development, I knew what that was like, right? It's long. It's a lot of hours and expectation on quality at the same time. Uh, there's a mortality on time always, right? So it can be a very stressful type environment, and but at the same time, there's a lot of satisfaction to putting out a game that everyone's heard of, right? We all worked, or you worked on games, or you worked on media, or friends that worked on stuff that people have heard of and versus the people who've never heard of it, right? And those
Mhm.
conversations are not as fun. It's like, oh, it's that I worked on this game. It's like, oh, what is that? Oh, it's this thing. It takes place with us. Like, oh, never heard of it. Sorry, yeah. Well,
There you go.
well, there you go. I worked on it though. That's you asked. Don't make it sound like I brought this on you for no reason.
I tell people I spent a week on Green Lantern, and that's never a positive.
Yeah, exactly right. So we have definitely titles that we're proud of and other titles we're not as proud of. But like with the smaller games, yeah, you put out games out there, but the day to day is when I talk to these people on the podcast, it's such there's a certain amount of satisfaction with that. Well, a lot of satisfaction with that because you're working with your friends or people that you only want to work with. So um, it's not as many strangers, right? When you're working at these smaller companies, it's
Hmm.
all through referral, and everyone's coming together because uh, mostly through passion, right? It's not. It's definitely not the money. I can tell you that it's not. You don't get paid as well in smaller companies.
Hmm.
The perks aren't as much, right? But the project and the passion behind the project, um, I feel is a lot greater. Um, just through talking to people on the podcast and experiencing it myself. A lot of uh, the podcast, I use it as a learning utility as well. It was to invite people to kind of explore and figure out and have a better grasp about the industry because it is our future, right? It's my future that I'm dealing with. I want to be taking in the data and figure things out before I find out that I'm that old guy that's irrelevant, right? So yeah, a lot of the podcasts and the guests that I bring on has helped kind of shape my career because I was like, wow, this guy has a lot of good things to say about smaller companies. I'm going to try that then. So
Hmm.
I would do that professionally. It's like, well, this guy said the mobile industry is actually really stable, uh, not as challenging, but your enjoyment of life is far greater. It's like, oh, it sounds interesting, and yeah, the mobile industry pays really well, has all the perks of bigger studios, and
Huge market too.
a
I mean, it's
huge market.
yeah.
And because they find out their data day to day instead of waiting 3 years,
Oh,
right? That
yeah.
changes the whole aspect of game development. It's like, whoa, this is a really different way of thinking things. This is a very evolved product, business product, right? Business model for a product, right? So
Does that possibly change with first the way Cloud Imperium does their thing, and then maybe now with Stadia and xCloud?
Cloud Imperium is kind of like in their own kind of yard of I don't know if you have friends there. I do, and I
Yeah.
always tease them about it. It's like their best interest is never to release that game. It's like it would be a negative profit if they released that game, because they've earned so much before release
Hmm.
that what's their motivation to release it? They're still earning millions every week. They have this ticker on their website that shows how much support they get, and if they do release it and run the chance of it not being as good as they promised, right? The money train, the gravy train will stop. So why would they ever release it? And the problem with that model, and a lot of it, I think, kind of killed the Kickstarter momentum that
Hmm.
had. A lot of people were like, "Oh, I can finance the game that I like. I can have more control of what's being put out there and not have to go through publisher or wait for publishers to call the shots and see what's going to come out the other end." Right now, put the control within the hands of our consumers, and let's have a chance for anybody with a great idea to see it to finish, right?
Yeah.
And of course, that's like the fairy tale version of what could have happened. And so what the reality is kind of in the middle, right? You would have games that, yeah, people supported and did really well, right? Small percentage, but most of it just underdelivered, overpromise.
Right.
And I was sad that that didn't work out, um, because I thought it was a great way to kind of help indie developers um, be completely independent, right?
Hmm.
Um, Although that model is still kind of working for some, you don't hear too much about Kickstarter being the avenue anymore for a lot of game developers. So that's sad. But it did like kind of push some positivity out of it with the Stadia and all that. I'm still on the fence about what that's about. We live in the States, and so uh, we have that whole net neutrality thing. Um, I don't know about you, but I've hit my data cap a couple of times already, which
Hmm.
is 1 terabyte. And they did that in anticipation of all these streaming, like for movies and gaming. Gaming's way heavier on streaming than movies, and so I don't know how that's going to play out if you're constantly paying too much on your data cap overages. Um, so I don't know. Like when I talk to developers about this and people who are working at Google on Stadia, like their outlook on it hasn't been overwhelmingly positive, which makes me kind of hesitate and wait and see. I don't think we're there yet. We're closer, but I think a lot of it's going to come from the PlayStation and Xbox with their streaming strategy. They've been doing it for years.
Hmm.
It's just not their premier focus when they talk about PlayStation and Xbox, but they're slowly shifting to make sure that people know about it.
Hmm.
Um, I think out of everything, Game Pass is pretty successful because they have both the PC and Xbox market. Um, but I'm going too off tangent. When it helps game developers is that it gives game developer the positive outlook for that is that game developers can, all these obscure titles, and I'm sure when you're in Netflix, you watch movies that you wouldn't normally watch, but it's there, so you watch it. So I'm hoping that that happens with games, right? All these obscure titles that doesn't have the marketing push as
Yeah.
other titles can finally have their time to shine and build buzz around it. But that's only a small window. That's always a small window
Hmm.
because it's not like Netflix. I'm looking for like indie titles. I'm looking for the big titles that everyone talks about, and maybe like 5% of my time I'm watching something that I never heard of, right?
Well,
So,
tell me about GDUX.
hmm
I was looking at this. This is kind of interesting what you guys are doing. You do it fairly often too, right?
yes. So GDUX, gdux.me
Yep.
is something we created this year. So it was kind of like it started kind of like a reunion of speakers or people we've had on the podcast,
Hmm.
and it's kind of an answer to what I've seen GDC as of late, right, where the prices have just been shooting up. Accessibility to these talks have been more expensive, right? Speakers aren't really giving their time on stage. Everyone's kind of being like rushed on stage and ignored. Where I felt like events like GDC, it used to be about the speaker and what we can learn the past year. Now it's just mostly for business meetings. So GDES was kind of like, well, why isn't this done online? Why can't we just bring all the speakers that have something important to say, something to teach about the industry, what's on the cutting edge, and just give their time? And so we did that. So we ran the first one in June. We had 20 speakers for 3 days straight, live streaming. And it was everybody that had something really interesting to say, that had timeless topics, that anybody that finds it 5 years from now uh, will find it helpful. And so we ran a second one because the first one ran so well just this past week in November,
Hmm.
and it went awesome. We were sponsored by Unity and Pure Force, and it's something that we're going to do every 6 months because it seems like every 6 months something's happening. This Quixel one is a big one. This Megascan thing, I equate it to a lot of students and a lot of colleagues of mine as like a photogrammetry in general is the next big jump since Normap. It's in combination with like ray tracing, right?
Hmm.
It's the biggest jump for game art I've seen since I've been in the industry. Because we saw a big jump from PS1 to PS2. slight jump PS2 to PS3, and then slight jump from PS2 to PS4, but nothing groundbreaking, right? It was just like more stuff, better graphics, sure. But in terms of what we do within the studio, it wasn't that much different, right? We were just adding more maps, more texture maps, and then just working harder.
Hmm.
But like this photogrammetry, this ray tracing is a whole switch of workflow, right? It really demands us to focus more on creativity and less about tools and techniques, which, like we've talked about, is much more important.
I like to ask this of everybody. I heard somebody ask this once. I thought it was a great thing, especially for us artists. How much of your success do you think is talent? How much of it is hard work? How much of it is luck?
Uh, I think a lot of it, for me at least, has been hard work and luck.
Yeah,
Talent, I don't know. Talent, it's not like I was born with a Cintiq, right?
yeah,
It's not something that was passed on to me. I don't think my lineage had artists or too many artists on it. I think it helps if you are surrounded by artists, right? If your family's like all made up of artists and you're surrounded by that, of course that's going to rub off. But
hmm,
to me, that's more about luck. It's more about being around opportunities.
yeah,
And so I've always been thankful. My first job kind of set me off on a path. I applied everywhere, as most students would, and I got lucky where one of those places were 2K, and this was right off of when BioShock was such a cult classic, right? Everybody was raving about it the year before, and it just happened that they opened up a studio in California where the original team is in Boston, right? Had no
hmm,
idea what it was. Was just hoping that it was a job. Maybe it was NBA 2K. Had no idea. But I had an artwork piece that appealed to the lead environment artist there that was somewhat, it looked like it was inspired from Bioshock, which it was. And so again, it came from a personal place where I was playing the game. It was reminiscent of games that I used to play when I was younger. It kind of like that dark, spooky, and it was Art Deco, which I've never seen in a game before. Stylistically, I just loved every part about it. And though I was kind of emulating with fan work, right, fan art,
hmm,
I I kind of made it my own, right? I didn't just take an environment from the game and recreated it. I kind of wanted to do my own environment with a Bioshock twist on top of it, right? So it was more a personal expression and then some Bioshock flavor. I wish I still have it, but and at the same time I don't because I'm sure it looks like crap. It doesn't age as well. but that was like again creating opportunities, right? I applied
yeah,
everywhere, which to this day I tell students not to do. Don't just blindly apply to play. Do some like precision strikes, right?
hmm,
uh, Apply to places that you want to work at, and then have your portfolio kind of tailored towards that workplace, right?
yeah,
But I was just lucky enough to catch someone's eye over there, brought me in for an interview. They weren't looking for junior level artists; they were looking for seniors. So I actually came in fresh from school, taking like a senior art test before, passed that, but then there was an on-campus one. Didn't quite pass that, but they liked me enough. I conducted myself enough within the interview where they're like, we're going to create a position for you. We weren't going to hire any junior or mid-level for this project. We just wanted all senior, but because I came across in my interview well and I was showing promise and potential, that they created a position for me. So that's something that it has more to do with luck and hard work. Um, I don't see it at all as talent. There was nothing about talent about me that got me that job. It was purely just me liking what I like and then just
hmm.
putting out there and just was lucky enough to apply to the right place.
Brandon, thank you so much, my friend. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Of course, man. Thanks again, Ryan.
Yeah. So guys, artstation.com/Brandon Pham, and then Game Dev Unchained, and you can also find him at GoDemix. And there you go. Awesome.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you guys for being here, and thanks again for sharing everything. I really, really appreciate it.
Of course, Ryan.
So,
I'm a big fan of yours, man.
thanks.
Been watching your tutorials forever.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
I won't blame my bad anatomy on you, though. That's just purely my. I'm just terrible at anatomy, but I've been loving everything you've been doing for the community.
That's great. Thanks. All right. Take care. Thanks,
All right,
guys.
Take care. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
All right. So I want to thank you so much for being here and taking the time to listen to this podcast. And I want to ask a couple of things from you. Number one, make sure you leave a comment or you rate this on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever that you're listening to this. It really makes a big difference in helping us get the word out and to help people understand what we do. The other thing is, I want to make sure that you know where to find us. Head over to www.vertexschool.com to learn about all the programs that we have for creatives. Our job at Vertex School is to teach you new skills in creative tech and help you get a job that matters to you. We lock in on the specific skills and triggers that people are looking for in the industry and what you need to do to prove that you can do this job. We're taking applications right now, so make sure that you head over to www.vertexschool.com and apply today. All right, again, thank you so much for being here. Have an amazing day.